Hey guys, Matthew, and today I'll be bringing you guys a video on my 3.14 League Starter build. This is a Blazing Salvo Miner, which is the same thing that I played in my Zero to Hero a couple weeks ago, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was incredible for the investment put into it, and that's why I decided to play it again, especially because in a League Start scenario, the build is going to be very, very cheap. So first off, I want to say that this current showcase that I'm about to show you guys is not a League Start scenario. This is a little bit more advanced. At this point in the build, I probably have somewhere between 20 and 30 exalts or so invested, depending on the price of these items, basically when you buy them into the league. But none of these are particularly insane. You'll see that none of these have like any crazy influence or any crazy mods. They're just actual regular item, no corruptions, not even an enchant. So this is still somewhat budget for a lot of people. Let's just go ahead and drop Bottled Faith as well to make it even more budget friendly. We'll replace that with I guess we could do, where is my Adziri's Promise? I should have one. Adziri's Promise. Sorry about that. Getting lost here. Okay, there we go. We've got Adziri's Promise instead, so not super expensive, but a little bit more invested into the build. So let's go ahead. I'll showcase a Maven's Writ, and after that, we're going to talk about the entry level of this build, which is basically 5 link and life base, and no more than just maybe 2 exalts for the entirety of the build. And I've used that to clear Maven every single invitation pretty much outside of the feared, and basically just walks over the entire game. But I will say it's not necessarily hardcore friendly. It's not super squishy, but it's definitely not a hardcore friendly build, because Saboteur just doesn't really have that kind of defense layers, unfortunately. Okay, so this is the low-life version of the build, a little bit more advanced, and this is a lot more simple because it's basically a one-button build. We are putting down our Arcanist brand on top of the enemy in order to get every single thing that is linked in here to apply automatically, and we just forget about it. All we have to do is put down Blazing Salvos. Now, the way the Blazing Salvo works is that it basically shoots in like a little cone or whatever, so you want to try to get as much damage as possible by shotgunning, and what this requires you to do is essentially put this Blazing Salvo as close as possible to the enemy. Now, what's going to happen is that your Arcanist brand is going to proc things like Wave Conviction, Combustion, Blade Blast, Flame Wall, and all that, and then this is going to buff up your damage, and then Blazing Salvo is just going to sequence a ton and then just shotgun the living crap out of the boss. You'll see that even in a 20-30x budget like I have right now, this build does more damage than some builds I've seen with multiple 100 exalts invested. That's how ridiculous we're talking. So I'm gonna let her blink initially, not to waste any of my flash charges or anything like that, and after she blinks, I'll go ahead and do the rotation, which is again just Arcanist brand, and that's about it. So go ahead and blink. Okay, Arcanist brand, we're going to put everything as close as possible we can to the boss, pop her flask, and she's dead. That's pretty much how Maven goes. That's how, oh wait, she's not dead. Wait, what? My whole life was a lie. Okay, I thought she was dead. Apparently she still had 1 HP when I left the fight. So yeah, the damage is pretty nuts. It just one-shots Cyrus, it one-shots Maven, it one-shots invitations. It's a very, very, very strong build, but it does require you to have the proper setup, which is again the Arcanist brand, and then having your Blazing Salvo shotgun as much as possible, and the sequencing is very, very important, which means that you are not going to be able to put, for example, detonate on left click, or at least for bossing. Now, for your regular mapping experience, you'll be perfectly fine with doing that. But for bossing, what you'll want to do actually is basically put all your mines down, and all of them, and then press your detonate key, whatever that is. On default, it's D, just one time, and let the boss just instantly melt. If you ever, during the detonation sequence, detonate again, what's going to happen is that your sequence is basically going to get canceled, and therefore you're going to do significantly less damage. So I wasn't quite able to skip the phase because I wasn't ready for that. I definitely didn't think she would let me. But you actually do enough damage that if you are fast enough on the setup, you can actually skip the memory game phases with this build, despite the fact that it's a very, very cheap build. And in my opinion, the advantage over on something like this, over, for example, oh, well, I'm dead, over something like General Cry build, is that this build actually also has really decent map clear because of the cone that I was talking about when it comes to Blazing Salvo. Okay, let's go ahead and finish this boss fight here, or at least this phase. Now you'll see the damage is nowhere near as good if I don't use my Arcanist brand, because I'm basically getting 4 different debuffs not applying to the boss, or even 5 different debuffs, or if we consider Flame Wall. So it's a big deal to basically use the Arcanist brand, and it's also a big deal to use your Blazing Salvo as close as you can to the boss. Okay, so that was kind of unlucky. Let's just go ahead and do the last phase. As you can see right now, I'm not regenning any ES, and that's because I walked on this little laser on top of doing insane damage. It also prevents any sort of regen from happening. So it's definitely not a good time. Definitely not a good time, this laser here. So let's go ahead and do that. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go ahead and let her blink. Oh, that's not good. This. So she's going to throw the sun at me. Okay, that should be enough to just pretty much just delete her. Oh, okay, that was my fault. Let's just say that never happened again. Oopsie, bit of an oopsie. Okay, I might die again. Nope, just kidding, we're good. All right, so not the best showcase ever. Yeah, I haven't done this in a while. Okay, chat. Okay, boys, I'm missing practice. Lack of practice. That's why. Now let's talk about everything else. All right, now that we showcased that the damage can be pretty obscene, just don't walk on the lasers. Okay, that's never a good thing on a build which is ES, because you can't regen. No flash or anything like that. All right, so first off, let's just check out the PoB. There will be 2 different PoBs now. I've redeemed the maximum number of PoBs, so I can't actually give you guys the second PoB. So the second link is going to be a ControlC link. How you're going to deal with this is basically go to the link, Control-A, Control-C, and then in PoB, you can go ahead and go to import right here and paste in the code, and then you can import. This is going to be the low life version of the build, which is a little bit more on the expensive side. But what I want to talk about is the, well, league starting version of the build, which is life-based. So the life-based version of the build, which I've cleared literally everything in the game with this. I've cleared Cyrus Waker level 9, no problem. Maven, no problem. Actually, I would say that this version is probably easier than the low life, because you can actually use a life flask. So the beam is nowhere near as annoying, but you can also just not walk into the beam, and that's going to be even better. As always, when it comes to my League Start PoBs, you will see multiple different trees. Now, you can't quite see them right now, but there are multiple trees in the PoB as you are leveling in order to make sure that you have the best leveling experience possible. So I think I have like almost 10 different trees that'll take you from the very beginning of the game all the way to the end game, which is level 92 tree. That'll look something like this. We're essentially grabbing all the damage that we can, and then life, and then finishing it off with some jewel sockets. Essentially, that's how this build goes. As you can see, over 600 crit multi and whatnot, 5.5k life, which is not crazy tanky or anything like that at all. But we also do have a lot of strength, which means our steel skin is very, very high level. It's actually going to be level 20, which is another 2,000. So in reality, your EHP is not incredibly low, but it's definitely not like a crazy tanky build either. All right, so as always, as well in my PoBs, under the notes section, you are going to have all of the information regarding leveling the builds. So you have Act 1, and the way that it works is that if you see a plus sign, that basically means that there's a link there. So Stormblast Mines is linked to Swift Assembly. And the way that I level this build, and that I most like to level this build, is as an Arc Miner. Arc Miner will literally one-shot everything. It's very, very comfortable because it auto targets. And it basically clears the entire screen because Arc has, chain as part of the skill itself. It's not the best single target in the world, but it can basically one-shot bosses all the way up to like Act 8 or something, where the Act 2 Wandcraft is going to start to have a bit of issues. Now, about the Act 2 Wandcraft, I've also listed it in here on how to do it. It's very, very important that you do this twice. You're going to want 2 wands with the Wandcraft, the Ringcraft, sorry. in order to be able to carry your damage. Once you do get to maps, you're going to want to upgrade your wands, or maybe even a bit earlier. I've added a link to a very, very simple search that you can basically live search and just pick up one of those wands. I would pay no more than a chaos for anything that pops up through this search, but those are going to be like multiple times better than the Act 2 wand craft. So if your damage is insane already, when you get to maps with Act 2 wand crafts, imagine once you get wands that are significantly better. We're talking about, 2 to 3, 4 times as good. That's how much we're talking. So it's very, very important that you pick up some wands once you get to maps, and then you're going to save up all of your currency until you get to Tremor Rod. Once you get to Tremor Rod, you're going to start buying these specific items, and actually you're going to swap over to these setup that I've listed in here, with the Blazing Salvo and how to actually set up all your gems. Now, one thing that I will note that I also added to the notes section is that we are using Malachi's Artifice in this build for the life version, especially for the budget version, because it adds insane amounts of damage. But this requires you to have no source whatsoever of additional flat fire damage to your build, because if you did, then this flat fire damage, let's say you have it on a visual or something, is going to add itself to your skill that is socketed in there and then deal fire damage. So you're going to get fire elemental equilibrium, which is really, really bad, because that means the bosses are going to take like half the damage. You don't want that happening. So no source of additional fire damage. But if you actually follow the items as I have listed them here and the gem setup, you are going to have no issues. Now, don't worry about the average hit or anything like that. It looks really low, but we're talking about literally millions of damage, even on a 5 link. With the way this build actually works, it's really, really strong, as I'll showcase in a clip real quick. But the items are very, very cheap. You'll see that it's super straightforward. Life, res, that's it. This is typically what I do when it comes to League starter builds. I would say that this build, in my opinion, is better than my Harvest Miner that I made, which was Ball Lightning at the time. I would say that Ball Lightning was maybe a little bit comfier to play because you didn't have as many buttons to because you didn't have like Flame Wall and all that. But otherwise, this build actually does way more damage than even pre-nerfed Ball Lightning. That's how strong we're talking when it comes to damage. In terms of survivability, it's pretty much the same. We have the same layers of defense. We are a acrobatics build, so it's all about not getting hit. We are stacking a decent amount of life. We have Steel Skin, we have Blind from Born of the Shadows, and we also have Pyromaniac, which is giving us 2% flat life regen, or up to 10%, so 10% flat life regen per second. So we've got some defense layers, but again, this is not a build that I would play in hardcore at all. It definitely lacks the defensive layers. But for a League starter build, in all the League starter builds that I've played so far and tried so far, in my opinion, this is probably the best and the strongest, even better than my Bladefall Blade Blast character from last League. Of course, the Bladefall Blade Blast build could abuse Poison Sextant, but I do think that this is going to be changed in the upcoming League. But anyway, so you've got all the different PoBs, you've got all the skills noted, all the items that you're looking for, and then the notes for leveling the build, exactly when you get every single one of these skill gems and all that. So it should be very, very, very easy to level this build step by step. And also, today, I actually leveled this build on stream. I did a fresh run from 0 to maps, and it took 4 hours and 40 seconds. So just shy of flat 4 hours in order to do everything, and it was a very scuffed run, right? This was like more than 2 months since I last practiced, so definitely not a very solid run. I had I think like 10 deaths or something, so I was playing very recklessly. I wasn't paying attention to my resistances, reading chat, etc, etc. You know how it is, and therefore it was a super scuffed run, and it was still just about 4 hours, as you can see. Let's see if I can get it, the Kitaba fight. Okay, so yeah, this is the Kitaba fight, and you can see the timer, 4 hours, and basically we were in maps at that point. So pretty fast leveling, despite the fact that we are actually not like an assassin or anything. We're not getting elusive, anything like that. It still levels really quickly, and the reason for that is that we never have to stop to kill, because arc mines, again, like I mentioned earlier, it chains off the entire screen, so you're always basically ahead when it comes to required XP, and you do a bunch of damage as well. Your single target damage is very respectable, so long as you're properly using the arc mines, which in this case is that you're going to want to put as many mines as possible close to the enemy, and then you're going to use your Wave of Conviction, which is going to be linked to conductivity, and that's pretty much just going to one-shot bosses. I've listed all of that in the notes of the PoB, so you don't have to worry about that. So for the showcase of the life version of the build, I had quite a few to choose from. I had Cyrus, I had Maven, I had all that, but I decided to showcase one of the bosses which I consider to be one of the more annoying bosses, and this is a Drox. Now this is zone level 82, which is a T15 Drox, and to put into consideration, this is around, I was like somewhere in the mid-level 80s, and I was on a 5-link Tremor Rod, and not only was I on a 5-link, my gems were around level 17 or so. So I was nowhere near having level 20 gems at this point, which is a massive deal when it comes to a build like this, unlike, for example, a melee build. Massive deal. And you'll see that the damage is pretty ridiculous. So the way that you get the most damage out of this build when it comes to the life version, it's actually something that is very important to pay attention to. Because if you don't do this, you're going to see your damage is nowhere near as good as what you're about to see. So the way that you do damage is that, again, like I mentioned earlier, you want your Blazing Salvo to be as close as possible to the enemy. But on the life version, since you're using a Comb's Heart, you don't have access to additional links like you do on the low life version to put everything on Arcanist Brand. Therefore, your Arcanist Brand is only going to proc a handful of things. In this case, I think it does Wave of Conviction, Blade Blast, and also Sniper's Mark, but it doesn't do Flame Wall for you, and also doesn't have Combustion, so you're lacking a lot of damage. So the way that you do this is that you'll put Flame Wall on top of the boss, or the enemy. You're going to put your Oberstorms to proc Elemental Equilibrium. You are going to put your Arcanist Brand, so this is 3 buttons, and then you're going to put as many mines as possible right next to him, and then just blow him up. Press the detonate key once, and then just let it rip. And you'll see the damage is pretty nasty, especially for something like a Drox with very entry-level gear. As you can see, he went from literally 100% HP to 50% HP in a matter of like a second. 5-link, no more than probably 2x invested in the build at this point in a league start scenario. Now you'll see here, I don't have all of these different mechanics that I mentioned at the start of when he actually gets to be damageable, which is why I'm doing so very little damage. But then the Sniper's Mark actually pops up, Oberstorms, Flame Wall, and then all of a sudden the damage just goes way high again. But at this point, I think I'm holding down my detonate key, so I'm not getting the sequence. As you can see, the mines are just detonating immediately, and that is not how you get most damage out of this build. It really is all about the sequencing and whatnot. But as you saw, the damage is pretty nuts, and it's a really feels good kind of build. I'll go ahead and showcase. Actually, I guess I can just jump into a map real quick, just to showcase what it looks like when clearing a map. I'm not going to do the whole thing or whatever, but just to showcase that the map spearing, the speed at which you can clear maps is also pretty respectable. So at this point, what I'm doing is I'm actually holding down my detonate key. I don't think I have a move speed flask though right now, because I'm in a bossing setup. Yeah, so no move speed flask, so that's a bit of an issue. But I'm basically holding down D. You could also put it on left click if you want to use your steel skin manually, or any cast when damage taken setup or something like that. But as you can see, the great thing about mines, unlike traps, is that they auto-target. So because they auto-target, you don't actually have to worry about throwing them in a specific spot or anything like that. You can just basically throw them and let the AI, worry about choosing where they're going to go. And as you can see, it's a very easy build. I'm holding down detonate, and I'm just tapping my mouse in order to throw the mines, and I'm never in any real danger. And it's the same thing. The damage is for monsters like this, just regular monsters, it would be the same thing on like a 5-link on the live version of the build. We would just be one-shotting literally everything. So yeah, it's pretty much it. I mean, I guess we'll just get to the end, to the boss at the end, and see if I can go ahead and do that. It is Guardian's Aid, which means we are going to get the double boss spawn. And like I said, it's definitely not the tankiest build in the world, but the damage is pretty nasty. So he is going to go away, which I probably shouldn't have wasted my flask for. Definitely was a mistake. But as you yeah, anyways, that's the kind of damage that you have if you're doing the whole sequencing mechanic. It's pretty nasty. Now, I wasn't quite paying attention, so I think a rock fell on top of my head and I died. But you know, if you didn't let the rocks drop on top of your head, Minotaur was basically also getting absolutely blasted. Invitations are basically just, you put the mines down and the bosses are instantly dead, so you don't actually have to fight them because you can basically front load all of your damage, which is the biggest advantage of mines. But anyways, that's pretty much my League starter build for 3.14. I'm absolutely looking forward to playing it, doing some boss killing services and all that. Obviously paying a little bit more attention than I did in this video showcase. But yeah, very, very happy with it. Now, before I go, as always, I do want to say a huge thank you to my supporters. So Flame Scorpion, Richard, Willie, Alex, Jordan, Emil, Raymond, Tim, Scott, Lost with the Map, Grimoire, Nathaniel, Krimis, Justin, Kevin, the other Justin, So Nice, Axel, Mercury, and Bizen, as well as, of course, anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous and anybody else who has supported me in the past, as well as a special thank you to anybody listed here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you're actually going to be a league starting with it, let me know if you're actually practicing, how your practice is going with this build, but you'll see it's an absolute blast to play. It clears maps incredibly easily, and then it murders bosses at some unreal speeds given the amount of currency invested into it. On that note, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.